All right, take it away, AT. Thanks for joining us, Christy.
All right, great. Thanks, JC, and thanks, Christy. We're excited to sort of share your story and some of your thoughts on what you all are building over there at Dr. Knows Best. Hopefully everybody got a chance to meet some additional folks and make some connections in the small groups. That's part of why we do this. But I think for the next 30 minutes, we're going to jump in with Christy a little bit. Just learn more about some of her background. She's been around startups, has lots of neat experiences and perspectives, and then we'll jump into Dr. Knows Best for a bit and then wrap up with just some thoughts on Atlanta and healthcare. And as a reminder, as you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And then as we get to the end, we'll call some of those out for Christy to help answer. Well, Christy, with that, we'll jump in. And again, I know you've got a pretty interesting background, having seen startups from lots of different perspectives. So, to do it justice, maybe you give us just a couple of minutes on some of the key stops in your journey around startups.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I get this one often, and I kind of have a very dyslexic career around startups. I have done everything from e-commerce vision and strategy, which was my very first company. Well, if we back up, my very first company was probably like you all, creating a lemonade stand on the side of the road, figuring out how I was going to make $1 a day. And my parents always very much encouraged it. In fact, fun fact, my grandmother started a company when I was a toddler, and she was one of the first female entrepreneurs in Atlanta doing construction and development and real estate investment trust. So I learned at a very, very young age, not only could women dominate entrepreneurship, but also that she was my path. I never had thought about working in a company. So really my stage started very young in and around real estate, like a lot of Atlanta. I grew my first company as a 24-year-old, diving into what the internet was and became around vision and strategy. So I was working very accidentally and organically with enterprise companies, helping them design vision and strategy and voice to the customer through e-commerce. I had a partner. It was a beautiful relationship. We built everything from creative design to, again, the voice of the customer and how we were going to reach them and sell to brands and branding awareness and e-commerce. So I exited that company. It was the best deal I ever had. I had never gone through an exit. I learned a lot. I sold to my partner. It was just, something dreams are made of. And the next third, fourth, and fifth company, which I'm on now, kind of led into everything from going back to my roots in engineering. I led a embedded software engineering organization from about 25 million to $500 million into M&A transactions along the way. Started my fourth company with money out of early money out of private equity, which I paid back very quickly because it was very low dollars. Which could have been thought of as down market venture capital in those days, but it was really giving me lift to help me get going. Built that and had a bifurcated exit both in hardware and software through an earnout. So I've learned through e-commerce services, developing services, and just kind of being an entrepreneur. And along the road, I had a very deep vision in and around creating momentum for entrepreneurs in early idea stage, and grew an accelerator, and also had a early stage venture capital fund funded by one of my early supporters here in Atlanta. So I've had, like I said, a very dyslexic 360-degree view over a 20-year career. I have worked for and in corporate enterprise as well through exits. And it's beautiful. It's great for people that show up every day. It's just my vision and my skill set doesn't work there. So I often say I'm unemployable in that marketplace. And I'm a great founder and entrepreneur, but I've also started, just to keep the math here, I'm on my fifth company, but I've actually started 9. So I think the trials and tribulations are actually more interesting than the 4 that I throttled down. So hopefully that helps give a perspective of where I've been and kind of where I'm going and my life history journey.
Very cool. Well, thanks for that, Christy. And there's obviously lots of things we could dive into there that I'll circle back to at the end on some of your lessons learned from companies at different stages and across industries and things like that. So we will definitely come back to some of that, but obviously Christy knows what she's talking about and seen lots of different situations. So we definitely want to pull on her experience here. Well, great. So, with Dr. Knows Best, we'll jump into that here a little bit. But before we do, maybe, Christy, what's the quick elevator pitch on what Dr. Knows Best is for folks who haven't heard of it?
Yeah, clean and simple. Dr. Knows Best is a baby tech brand really focused on creating the modern nursery for modern parents. That really is our tagline. We focus on products inside the nursery that solve real world problems, such as respiratory distress, air quality, and even humidity, which is something we're addressing this year. So that's the quick and dirty on who and what we are. These are real world problems for modern parents.
Very, very cool. And this was one of those I was telling somebody in our breakout room. The first time I heard of Dr. Knows Best, I was like, man, I wish I had this when my kids were little. With the number of humidifiers and breathing devices and suction things we had that didn't work.
Yeah.
So definitely, I love what you're doing. So maybe let's jump into then a little bit of the origin story. How did this come about?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to raise my hand and say I'm the brilliance behind it, but honestly, I have a lucky and brilliant co-founder and inventor, Dr. Stephen Gowdy, who is with our customers in and out all day long doing customer discovery. He's a pediatric ENT surgeon for the Emory University and Eggleston group of hospitals, and he has had a tremendous desire to help parents proactively stay out of the emergency room. The story I really like to tell that he emphasizes often is, he had a case in an emergency room, and it's happened many times. This is not an isolated case where he, is brought in to check on a child and, respiratory distress and who can't breathe. And just fun fact, infants are really unable to breathe through their mouth the first 12 months of life. So when they are congested, it really is traumatic. Or if they're suffering from a chronic disease or illness or allergies or cold or RSV or COVID, these things always, kind of break down the respiratory system. So he was walking in to see a case and the mother said, I don't need you. I need that thing on the wall behind you, which is a hospital grade suction. And for parents who have infants that have been in that scenario, you know what I'm talking about. And he said, I'm going to give that to you. So really, the gimmick was all built around, that one statement. And Dr. Gowdy, began his quest to create what we call our hero product, which is the NozeBot. It's the first of its kind nasal aspirator in market with hospital grade suction. And we'll talk a little more about that later, but that's our first product in an innovative suite of products that we'll bring to life.
Yeah, that's great. So Christy, maybe tell us a little bit more about that from the sort of genesis of was in the hospitals, somebody comes in, I just want that. How does that translate from the research that had already been done in the hospital and the devices that already existed to how you then move to starting to build something that you could sell? Yeah,
great question. So it didn't happen overnight. I mean, we are a FDA 2 med device, and anything that kind of goes in the body like an aspirator has a path to compliance and med tech qualification. So Steve really took it to market and identified the talent that would help him. Company number 1 employee was Chase Reinecke, who actually is our COO today and has a deep background in healthcare device creation and really helped Steve get that off the ground in the very, very early days. It was an ideal with spreading, so to speak. Nasal aspirators are not new, but our competitive landscape is pretty low tech from the aspirated through the mouth, or the one, you see these videos of parents putting their mouth over the baby to suction it out. Or even, the bulb that many of you who are parents receive, as you go home from the hospital after the birth of your child, which can absolutely, all of those things spread virus and biodebris and other things that, you don't want inside the baby's nose that can actually lead to infection, bacteria, and other respiratory problems. So that's kind of the marketplace today. There are other electronic nasal aspirators. So we knew that that market was something where we had to differentiate ourselves. And so our value proposition was really this hospital grade, but also we have a patented 2-finger nose piece on our aspirator that allows you to hold the baby and not wrestle the baby to aspirate it. And that is a pretty important thing, but it's not just that one product. That was the one product we were solving immediately. But there is, like, as I've indicated, a more modern nursery that we're after that helps not just preventative respiratory, but breathable air and climate solutions that will solve the problems.
Very interesting. I want to jump into the product roadmap, in a little bit, but just on the idea you mentioned, the FDA and the compliance. This is obviously something that's, unique to healthcare and the process there. I don't want to spend too much time, but, for folks who may be building a med device company or may need some of this compliance, any lessons learned of going through that process or how to think about that they could take away?
Yeah, it's such a great question because as a startup, we really have to focus on compliance and regulation in medical device. And we know what we know and we know what we don't know. And we're very sensible, not just about how much we have to allocate to spend in those areas, but what we can do in-house and how we have to allocate funding to ensure we are compliant. So we have a lot of help with external resources and partnerships, such as, contacts across our network, customer discovery, but really kind of diving into the compliance pieces. There are companies that help you do that quarter by quarter, and we have to measure that and report back to the FDA how we're performing. So much like many of you identify, is that an internal resource that we should be spending money on, or is that really an external role that we can focus? So, and there's also organizations, if you're here in Georgia, there are many organizations like GCMI. I love to give shout outs to them, Georgia Center of Medical Innovation, that help us when we think about products and going to market and how we design and comply to those particular standards. Biolocity, Georgia Tech, Emory University have all been in our court, helping us navigate some of that. So really it's making those early decisions. What can I do in-house? Where do I have the expertise, and what do I need to go find? And then certainly, my finance mind goes back to how much is it going to cost me to be compliant, stay compliant, and make sure that we're serving the market we've committed to.
Very, very, very good. And I think I like that lens of, hey, what can we be good at and do internally and justifies versus what is we just need to pay externally for that to get that expertise and move on.
Yeah, and being simple about it, right?
So as you're going through this, right, you obviously have the long process that this takes to get certain approvals and things along the way. But how did you think about, you mentioned a little bit on how you were going to differentiate the product, but then also combining that with what will people buy? So tell me a little bit more about how you thought about the differentiation and how that value prop would be pitched to your customers.
Yeah, so we love to talk about what our value proposition is. There's a lot of market penetration in around nasal aspirators in particular, but also parents. We're looking to really solve and replicate 3 things: eating, sleeping, and breathing. And those 3 things are the impetus for where we build and solution around. So how we do that is oftentimes the obsession with our customers, speaking to them, figuring them out, presenting them with new innovation, which we're doing now, leading with our hero product, and then, really kind of thinking, how do we go to market with that? Let's not break the bank on things that aren't working or people aren't interested in, but let's really separate ourselves with our value proposition of what's the differentiator. You've heard me say 2 things several times, even in our short time together. For NozeBot in particular, which is our leading device, it's about suction and it's about comfort. So it's the 2-piece, the 2-finger design and it's also the hospital grade suction. And that's a very easy separator. And then you add on the fact that we're not transmitting virus and our parts are dishwasher safe and washable, and reducing virus in the age that we live in, 3 years now into COVID, is a very critical thing. It's something we think about that we would not have, 3.5 years ago. So really those delineations are what's really important. But, backing up to those core principles of eating, sleeping, and breathing, as I spoke about earlier, when your child is sick or even, having allergies in its own room and can't breathe, you'll do anything at all to get rest, replicate the good night of sleep that it did have, and then find a comfortable climate to repeat that over and over. And so those are the things that we are most focused and obsessed with.
Very, very, very cool. So you talk about the value prop there, and I like that. One of the things that's always challenging about healthcare is go-to-market strategy, right? Hey, do I go in through consumers? Am I going through businesses or payers or hospitals or clinics or providers? There's lots of options, almost an overwhelming choice. How did you all think about your initial channel and go-to-market strategy?
Yeah, I'm founder first. So I have the crazy obsession. I know David Cummings and AT, you talk about it a lot. We are in love with our own ideas. It's like go big or go home, let's go everywhere all at once, but let's get real. It's costly. And we have to stay in our lane. And it's something I coach entrepreneurs on each and every day. We have to be smart, and you have to be smart about your spending, because as we know, nearly 50% of startups fail due to cash burn. So as we meet today, we chose to only enter the market through direct to consumer first. That gave us a couple things: product market fit and capital to grow. So today you can only purchase our products in Amazon and then our own Shopify environment. Tomorrow, or this year, I should say, we are actually entering our first retail channel and then our first geography outside the US. So we're working very sensibly to scale outside direct to consumer, but staying in that lane for us the first 18 months of business has been smart. So when we think about our first expansion into retail and then following on with a geographic expansion, we think about the economic impact, geopolitical sensations that are happening. We're also very radical about marketing. Since I started, it's just the obsession with customers, but it also comes as no surprise that we're really providing exceptional content to parents. We do a lot of lives. We have our TikTok superstar, Dr. Gowdy, who's on often providing medical knowledge about a surgery he's doing or, particular things. So our go-to-market strategy has always been really the center of how we do grow, not just through channel, but also through marketing.
Yeah, a couple questions there. I loved how you talked about the focus, right? Instead of trying to go do everything at once, we're going to start here and then nail that. And you said product market fit, and then you move on to the retail channel, and then you move on to the geographic expansion. But you mentioned product market fit, and this is always one of my favorite topics because that's a word everybody talks about, and it means different things to different people. How did you think about what did that mean, in your case here with Dr. Knows Best, and just generally given your experiences, with startups?
Yeah, brilliant question. Oftentimes, the dialogue becomes, I've got product market fit. But do you, right? If you're looking at a, financial growth graph and it's going up and to the right, that's amazing. But when do you really have product market fit? It's when you're stable and you can iterate that same revenue over and over for months on end. That's product market fit. When your consumers or your customers are buying or have an appetite for your services or product over and over, that you can do a smooth forecast over 3 to 5 years and say, this is the exact revenue target I have, and this is what we're doing. That is really critical to learn. That graph that we all look for, not just as entrepreneurs, but investors of, the hockey stick growth is great, but I want to see that for 5 years straight. That's how I know I have product market fit.
Love that. And I think, one of the things, my favorite conversations I've had with an entrepreneur was they were at I think, over 3 million in annual recurring revenue. And he said, AT, we don't have product market fit. That if we put all of our customers in the same room, they would all have different uses of our product. They would all want different things. We would sell them all different ways. There was none of that consistency that you mentioned of, hey, I understand how to sell them, what the value prop is, and then how to start scaling that up.
Yeah, and the brilliance around that, just to add a point, is, if you're doing that in a particular, business or geography, now you can pick up what you've learned and grown and move it into new geographies or different businesses. I think, again, being radically focused is very important. Staying in our lane for a while to, fund our own growth and be deliberate about bootstrapping, which is what we're doing, is very important to not just navigate the headwinds we see in the financial and equity markets and institutional investment, but also as your customers grow with you. Not all of us have recessive proof companies, right? Some are, but it's very important to really think about the next 3 years versus very short-term gains, which is oftentimes what you do see in the hockey puck. The hockey stick. I'm not a hockey player, obviously. I'm a runner.
But I think another interesting thing you said there, Christy, is about customer funded growth. And I think this is something that a lot of entrepreneurs trip up on, is they think they have to go raise this money from some venture firm or something like that. And one of the best ways to do it that's non-dilutive to you is go get customers to pay for it. And then, hey, as an added plus, most investors love it when you're already self-funded via customer is paying. So it's a win-win there. So I really like that you said that. So last question on sort of product and channel roadmap. You mentioned obviously the different channel strategies moving forward, but you alluded at the beginning, hey, this is product one of ultimately a product suite in the nursery. How do you think about balancing teams' focus on new products versus new channels?
Yeah, so team focus on products, and channels is a very interesting, somewhat, dichotomy of itself, right? We're asking customers, not in a rigorous way, but we're starting to really spend time with them now to make sure that the problem we're estimating or hypothesizing is really a problem. And if it's not, we've got to be willing to, sacrifice R&D. For us, R&D is probably the number one focus over the next 36 months for us as we grow a brand. Because again, going back to our original comment on my original comment on the value prop, it's, eating, sleeping, breathing. How are we going to solve those problems, but not do it in a mechanical way, do it in a real way that my persona of parent who's, age 24 to 44, will consume. They're looking for particular data. They're looking for us to solve macro trends around rising healthcare costs, concierge medical practice. They want in-home preventative wellness, and they want it in a more holistic way. So understanding that and kind of how we navigate that is really critical for us as a company. I think it's critical for anyone right now. But what's the second part of your question, AT, just so I make sure I cover that?
Yeah, but I think you touched on it enough. It's just how do you balance that, build more new products versus take the same product and just apply it through different channels?
Yeah, great question.
Focus.
Yeah, the other piece I'd like to add to that is just we also listen, consume, and iterate. So this year we have 2 additional Noze bots coming into the market that are solving problems from the original product. The original product has raving reviews. If you look on Amazon, the average is about a 4.8 review. But we do hear, hey, it's, the battery life's not long enough. So we're addressing that and we're releasing, version 2 and 3 to get parents what they need. And then in 24, we have a travel version. So it's, lighter and more compact and has 1 speed and they can take it on the go. We are not just addressing, the reactive parent whose child is suffering with RSV, we're also, doing preventative work and identifying those customer personas that, have asthma or chronically ill or children suffering with allergies. So, kind of identifying that and making some tweaks along the way as we iterate is really relative for us.
Very, very good. So last question sort of on the team side, and then we'll share some lessons learned and some other thoughts. But as you're starting to see some of the success of the product market fit and the Amazon reviews and expanding to new channels, I always like to ask the question, how do you think about setting the internal team and culture as you're building this company?
Yeah, I've used the word obsessed many times. I'm really obsessed with team. And then how do we, build the effective team that lasts over time? It's absolutely the most critical element of an early stage company. You hear the nomenclature, fire fast. That's not how I go into any hiring relationship. I go into a hiring relationship with, I'm going to take my time here because it's costly to make a mistake. And startups can't afford it, right? So the team is the most relative. We want people like us, all of us internally, who are 7 strong right now, with about, roughly 3 part-timers, and we are growing. We're looking for A players. They are very intuitive with their performance and the products that we make. They move the needle. They're solving problems around infants. They are parents mostly. They are special people. They're the needles in the haystack. And again, it's worth the wait so that we don't make the mistakes. We also have no room for brilliant jerks. The ones we talk about. Netflix has a whole culture not built around it. They disrupt meetings. They're the ones who are arrogant or love giving the place above everyone else about their intelligence. And, maybe they even ridicule your team. We don't want them. And we're not going to have, environments that collaborate if we hire one of them. So again, just being patient and kind as an organization and establishing the culture that we want is the most critical. We also have a huge care for diversity. And I would say right now in our early days, we're insane about flexibility. We also have a lot of moms, as you might imagine. So we want the place and time to help them grow, not just in their own, environment and skill set, but also, if you've got a sick kid in daycare, you've got a sick kid. And so we need to be sensitive to how they dispute their own lives every single day and supporting that. So pairing that with just the autonomy of knowing they are individual, just contributors, but they're also insanely focused on being the A player that they are. Those are the cultures that we want to build. And we put rigor around that process too.
Well, and I love that sort of takeaway for the audience, right? That, hey, the team is absolutely the most important thing, for an early startup. And I think, as we all know, there's lots of things that you can't control in the startup world, but the team is one that you can 100% control, and it's definitely worth the effort there. We're coming up in the last 10 minutes here. A couple questions to wrap up, Christy, and I've seen some questions in the chat. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll get to some of them at the end. But having, seen lots of startups, back to your experience, at the beginning from different angles and now coming into a healthcare startup, what are some lessons learned that you've observed, whether it be healthcare versus other startups or just different stages of startups that you could share with the group? Maybe, 1 or 2 things that absolutely should do or that we haven't talked about, or 1 or 2 things that be careful about X.
Yeah, compliance is critical in healthcare. It's something I've had to learn. I did not come from a healthcare background. I, consider myself the backseat scientist. I'm, very, very focused in scientific things and always have been. But learning that the compliance standards and how do I lead an organization and create the confidence, not just for the team, but anyone around us, our customers, our community, making sure that they understand we really do have rigor around that. That's a tough lesson to learn and figure out and make sure, again, as a stated earlier, that you've got the right resources on the outside that lift that up and help you. That is a really important lesson learned. I also think ensuring, we're in a huge D2C channel. There are oftentimes none of us are together in a room, and there are oftentimes we're all together in a room. But that continuity and keeping us, together once a quarter has been really, important to us as an organization and as a team. So we're not all together, but we can be 3 days, 3 days a quarter. And that's when we strategize and create our vision and set measurements and goals. That's a critical lesson too. I often coach startups in and around, even myself, every day. I don't have the hubris that I show up every day and go, oh, I've got the answer. But if you have metrics and measurements and you're setting goals quarter to quarter, those are questions you can answer relatively well, not just in the team, but also recognizing that quarter by quarter, you have an opportunity to set a reset button. Yes, of course, there's a 3 or 5 year strategy, but every quarter dictates what that looks like. And I think having, very aligned, visible metrics that your team is aiming towards is critical. If they don't have anything to look at, they don't have anywhere to go, and neither does the business.
Very, very good. Christy, I love that sort of advice of bringing the team together and keeping them focused on where are we going forward to the next quarter. All right, last question for me, and then there's a few in the chat. We'll jump over to those and then wrap up. But as you're moving forward and expand the retail strategy stuff, any asks or comments to the group while you got here of next steps, or anybody could be helpful to you as you're moving forward with Dr. Noze Best?
Oh my gosh, there's 100 asks. I could give you a whole list in the chat. No, I'm always constantly, looking for customers of ours that we can speak to. We'll never stop doing customer discovery and understanding our demand and what we're creating. Would love to hear from you, connect with you if you are a customer or a parent, or even, someone that wants to be part of the community. That's my first ask. Secondly, yes, we are exploring new worlds. We are the Christopher Columbus of baby tech right now, right? So we're on the ships going towards new land, and any offering or advice around retail strategy and boutique strategy, I would love to spend time with you and understand that even more. We have great hand holding, but there's never enough. And, everyone has particular expertise. And then, certainly anything to offer that I may offer through learnings or exploration, successes or failures. I'm always delighted and excited to share as a successful founder, but a failing founder. So happy to do any of that as well.
Awesome. And I love that line too, for folks paying attention. Never stop doing customer discovery. It's
Never.
not a one-time process at the beginning. So I love that you said that, Christy. Couple quick questions from the chat and others, I'll try and pull a couple ones out. Does insurance cover any of this, Christy?
Does insurance cover our devices?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're HSA and FSA compliant, but we are not covered in insurance. I'm not really pursuing that path right now. It's not in our channel strategy, but great question. And it's one that we talk about often.
Another question was, what was the basis to choose markets outside the US?
So, kind of some easy math there. It's simple for us to look in our own backyard. So, Canada and South America, obviously being near neighbors, easy to export, near shore. Those are areas of focus for us right now. And then narrowing the scope even further, are they English speaking? Because, again, when we think about exporting, that makes the most sense. So our top 5 countries on the map are English speaking and near neighbors, and, Southern Hemisphere versus where we are. So those are really important aspects. We also have, partnerships here in Georgia with economic development and so on that are helping guide us slightly through this process as we are maturing. And having their tutelage in some ways is helping us really refine that decision over and over and get smart about it. Going global is expensive. and not doing it well can, again, make you nearly 50% of startups that fail if you do it incorrectly. So just being deliberate about how we do that.
Got it. Well, awesome. Well, Christy, so many great lessons learned. I jotted down a few about that. Never stop doing the customer discovery, and team is absolutely the most important thing for an early stage startup. Lots of good nuggets here. So thank you so much for sharing your story and some of the lessons learned. We look forward to following your continued success here. One last question just came up. We'll hit this and then we'll wrap up with JC. But how did you get funding and how did you decide on how to do that?
So we haven't raised any funding. Thank you, Claudia. I saw that pop up. We've been growing through revenue growth in our own bootstrapped funding. So right now we haven't made a decision to do outside capital. It's something we're thinking about, but it really has to be the right partnership. Much like I would counsel myself as well as other founders. If we do decide to do that, it's a fund and a partnership that looks like us, invest in things like us, and feels like they're a partner. We're not in the space right now that we can move through passive investment or investors that can't help us. So that would be our decision making. And then certainly, the tenets that follow: check size, location, and all the things, non-competitive, non-threat environment. So those would be all the aspects I would look at if we were going to be looking for funding. And then the when is the other piece. How fast do we want to go? How much do we need? And when would that be? And because I have a venture background, those are obvious points of clarity that I'll dive into before we make a decision to use outside capital.
And I think, again, inherent in what Christy said, which I love, is it's not you have to do it. She's got a lot of optionality to pick the right firm, the right time, the right amount that would be supportive to her business. So she's in a good position to have that optionality. Yeah. Well, great. Well, JC, maybe bring the screen back here to wrap up. We'll share some of our upcoming events and stuff like that. But again, big thank you to Christy for sharing her story. We've got a resource page online, atlanaventures.com/healthcare. We'll post, this meetup as well as our past ones. If you missed any previous ones I want to watch, if you've got a company in Atlanta, we got a form fill out on the site. We'll put it on the site for you, for everyone to see. Here's a few upcoming events. We got a couple of healthcare ones that are going on. I know Jeff Gray does some stuff with H-Tech, and Tag Digital Health has some events. We're hosting Atlanta Startup Combos for a couple early entrepreneurs presenting. And then we'll probably do our next healthcare one early May before the summer rolls in. But again, really appreciate everyone joining us this morning. Hopefully you'll be able to connect with some new folks and get some takeaways from Christy's message. I know I learned a lot, and we'll definitely post the recap here in a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, y'all. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.